how to analyze companies. Hi everyone, my name is Johannes Niari and welcome to this channel, welcome to Mastering Consulting. On this channel I share my own learnings and experiences from my own current journey in management consulting to help you to become more successful and living a balanced life in management consulting. And if you're new to this channel, then please subscribe to it. Also leave a thumb up, this will help you that you don't miss any new video here on this channel. And today we talk about how to analyze companies in management consulting. And if we talk about company analysis, then we have to see that this is a very important part of management consulting and actually at the start of many different projects. So it's very essential, especially if you start new in a consulting job, in the consulting world, that you know what kind of aspects you have to be aware of if you want to analyze a company. And there are several use cases where you can analyze companies. So first of all, and this is obvious, if you have a new client and if you want to learn about this client, then it's time to do a company analysis and kind of, try to understand the actual business. And this is use case number one. And this is typically in every project, I would say, where you really start and have to research about the company just to get familiar with the business model, with the financials, with the situation the company is in. So this is probably the first use case when you want to analyze companies. The second is if this is part of your project, and there are many consulting projects where you have to analyze companies. For example, if you want to develop a new strategy. So usually the first step is that you analyze the status quo of a company. And this is typically where you perform an internal company analysis. The second type of project is if you want to do turnaround or restructuring projects or something like that, then you also need to be aware of the current situation. And there are many other projects as well. And the third use case where you want to do analysis of companies is if you are in the investment space. So maybe you're working in an M&A project, maybe you want to invest yourself, even then it's important to do the analysis, or maybe you work in the private equity environment. Also, their company analysis is a huge part of the business. And today I want to talk about the most important aspects if you want to analyze a company. And there are mainly three aspects that you should be aware of. So a company analysis is typically divided in three main areas. So it's first the company analysis itself, and this covers typical aspects like business model, the situation, the market, suppliers, customers, and so on. Then the second part that you want to analyze is the profitability analysis. And this means that you take a close look at the profit and loss statement and really try to figure out, okay, how does revenue develop? How do the costs develop? How does profitability develop? And how is the operational situation of the company? And the third aspect is the financial analysis. And this basically means that you take a look at the balance sheet, at the cash flow statement, and really try to figure out, okay, do I see some major issues here? For example, in the cash flow, is the company cash flow positive in terms of balance sheet? Is there some over leveraging of the company? And those are typically aspects that you want to take a look at. So with that being said, let's take a look at each of those factors in a bit more detail. Let's start with the company analysis, and this is typically where you start. This is typically where you begin your company analysis. And usually a good place to start is that you take a look at the history of the company. So maybe you try to figure out when the company was founded, if there have been some major developments, some key people who led the company throughout the decades maybe. Have there been some major transactions that you should be aware of, just to get an overview of the past decades and also the later history. Also, obviously, you want to know about the locations. So you take a look at the headquarters, so where is the headquarters of the company, but also all the branches, all the production facilities. Is this more a regional company? Is this more a globally acting company? Those are obvious also things that you want to check. Then you take a look at the structure, the subsidiaries. So how is the company structured? Is there a holding structure? Is there like a geographical structure or functional structure? Stuff like that. Are there any subsidiaries that you have to be aware of? Any side businesses? Any equity participations of the company? This is typically also something that you want to take a look at. Also, sometimes the shareholder structure is interesting. So is there maybe one central shareholder? Is it maybe a public company? Who owns the company? What kind of important shareholders do we have? What kind of interests are there in play? And this is definitely something that might be of interest. Then obviously the business areas and the portfolio. So what kind of products does the company have? Is the portfolio diversified? Are they really focused in one market? Also the business model and the value chain. So how does the company actually make money? Is there a certain value chain that you can map out in order to illustrate and get a better understanding of the company? And of course the customers and supplier portfolio. So how are the customers distributed? Are there any dependencies of some very few large customers? Or is it more like a broad customer base? It's the same with the suppliers. Are there any kind of dependencies from one huge supplier, or are we sourcing from multiple suppliers? And those are all important aspects if we talk about the company analysis. And this is also where I would start. So if you are staffed on a new project, for example, or if you just want to read about the company, I would start with these points. This can take up to, I would say, at least 5 to 10 minutes if you really don't have any time. Maybe if you are on the way to the client, if you're staffed on a very new project, you can do this within a couple of minutes, or you can take a day or two time to do the analysis, or even, if this is a project and you really want to go into depth, you can also interview the client and really try to get some very detailed information here. So there's a wide range of scope that you can apply to these kind of questions. Then the second question is the profitability analysis. And this is also very important to understand, okay, is the company profitable? What are the prospects of the company? And there are also some very typical things and steps of analysis that you usually perform. So first of all, it's the development of revenues and profitability. So you take a look probably at the past, let's say 5 to 10 years. Sometimes if you don't have data, maybe the last 3 years at least, to get a feeling, okay, is revenue increasing? Is revenue decreasing? How about profitability? To get a feeling about that. Also, you want to take a look at the structure of the profit and loss statement. So this means actually that you take a look at the main cost drivers. So are the COGS, so the cost of goods sold, are those very high? Do you have more overhead costs? How do they relate over time? To identify the main cost drivers that you have and also their developments. What you usually also have to do is that you do some adjustments of extraordinary positions. So very often you have some special events that kind of, or some kind of financial engineering, which can have a huge impact on the P&L of the company you want to analyze. If you want to make those adjustments, then you really have to have some deep dive or some deep knowledge about accounting and what those typical levers are that companies use to kind of pimp their profit and loss statement. So be aware of that, and this takes some time, and sometimes you need some insights on that. Also, the development of the headcount is always very important. So is personnel going up? Is it going down? This can give you some indication about important cost drivers. Also, you want to maybe take a look at the order income. So is this healthy? Is this on a good foundation? Has been order intake be constant over time, so that we don't worry about incoming orders. This is usually a good predictor of the revenues that you maybe want to forecast. And you also can take a look at selected KPIs, so maybe some percentages in terms of profitability, maybe some ratios, some cost ratios, cost of goods sold by revenue. This might be something that you might be interested in, and this is certainly something to consider. The profitability analysis is also part of many projects and would be probably the second thing that I would take a look at just to get an understanding, especially if we talk about consulting and strategy projects. We are very often focused on the profit and loss statement because as management consultants, we very often want to make sure that profitability is increasing, and this means that the analysis of the profitability is part of many consulting projects. And last but not least, we have the financial analysis. And here I have to say that you don't do that in every project. You particularly do that in turnaround or transformation or restructuring projects, or maybe if you want to understand the financial health of a company. So this would be more like investment related stuff. But what you can do if you want to take a look at the financial statements, and this includes like cash flow statement, also balance sheet statement, is that you check the development of the liquidity. So you check all the cash assets, how do they develop over time, how big are our cash reserves, is there some safety buffer, especially now we talk about recessions, so this is very important. How does equity develop? So are we over leveraged, for example? You take a look at the development of the cash flows. So how do operational investing and financing cash flows relate to each other? Does the operational business generate cash? Do we have to finance it? Are we doing a lot of investments? How about the capex? Those are all very interesting questions. Also the structure of the balance sheet. So how do our assets distribute? Also the equity and the liabilities. How do they relate to each other? What is the equity ratio, for example? This gives you also a very good indication about the financial health of a company. Also, you take a look at development of selected balance sheet positions. As I said, maybe the cash and equivalent positions might be of interest. Maybe certain assets, maybe the working capital you want to take a look at. So this could be also be very interesting. Then sometimes you do an analysis of balance sheet risks, so that you try to figure out, okay, how big is the danger of a over leveraging? Is there a debt ratio that is too high? Are there any risks involved? Especially if you have some loans, can you pay them back? Those are also relevant questions, especially in restructuring projects. Then sometimes you also take a look at loan structures. Maybe you want to take a look at the default risk. So maybe some financing that might default. Maybe some loans that you can't pay back. Those are all very relevant issues. And maybe you take a look at other applications from the past, just to check if there are any risks involved. And those are typical things that you take a look at if we talk about company analysis. So overall, we can say that a company analysis is a very important part of many consulting projects. So if you start in consulting, you definitely should be familiar with them. And this should give you a pretty good guidance. So if your project team asks you to do a company analysis, this should give you a rough guideline what aspects might be of interest. Of course, you could do a deep dive about every of those aspects. Most likely, probably your firm also has some templates that help you, some slide templates that help you to do these kind of analysis. And there should be some senior people within your company who also know how to do this. But this should give you a rough orientation what is important if we talk about company analysis in consulting. With that being said, of course, I'm interested. If I missed anything, then please write it down in the comments. And if you like this video, if this brought value to you, then please leave a thumb up and subscribe to this channel. This would help to grow the channel. And with that being said, I hope you have a very successful day. Hope to talk to you soon. Goodbye, Johannes.